The sun was shining brightly over the small town of Cedar Hill. It was a peaceful day. Birds were singing, kids were laughing in the distance, and people were shopping for groceries at the local store. But for Mrs. Evelyn, a 72-year-old woman, this was just another quiet day in her simple life. She slowly parked her old car in a reserved space near the store entrance. The sign in front of the space read, "Reserved for military veterans and their families." Evelyn stepped out of the car carefully. Her gray hair was tied in a neat bun, and she wore a soft blue cardigan over a white blouse. She held her purse close and smiled at a child walking past. But her peace didn't last long. Two young police officers, Officer Miller and Officer Trent, were standing nearby, sipping coffee and chatting. When they saw Evelyn getting out of her car, they exchanged glances and laughed. Hey, look at that," Officer Trent said. "Granny just took the vet spot." Officer Miller chuckled. "You think she served in Vietnam?" They both walked toward her. Evelyn had just taken her shopping list from her purse when she heard one of them say loudly, "Excuse me, ma'am. That parking spot is not for regular old folks." She looked up, surprised but polite. "Good morning, officer. I parked here because this spot says it's for veterans and their families." Officer Trent raised an eyebrow. "You a vet?" "No," Evelyn said gently. "But my son is." Officer Miller rolled his eyes. "Right, let me guess. He served in the kitchen." They both laughed again. Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't shout. She just looked them in the eye and said calmly, "My son is a Green Beret." That made them pause for a second. But then Officer Trent shook his head. "Lady, anyone can say that. Got any proof?" Evelyn opened her purse slowly and pulled out a photo. It showed a tall man in full military gear, with medals on his chest. His face was calm, his eyes sharp. Behind him was the American flag. Evelyn held the photo gently, as if it were made of gold. "This is my son. His name is Ethan King." The officers looked at the photo, unimpressed. Sure, Officer Miller muttered. "Could be anyone." Evelyn returned the photo to her purse without saying a word. Then, Officer Trent took out his notepad. "Well, if you don't have a veteran's ID or some official tag, we'll have to give you a ticket. Rules are rules." A small crowd had started to gather. People were watching. Some whispered. Some looked uncomfortable. A teenage girl said under her breath she didn't do anything wrong. An old man nearby shook his head. "They're just trying to show power." But Evelyn stood quietly. She looked at the officers and said, "He's coming to visit me today. He just came back from his last mission." Officer Miller raised an eyebrow. "Oh, the Green Beret is coming here." Evelyn gave a small nod. "You'll see," she said simply. Just then, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. It moved slowly, silently, like it didn't need to prove anything. The windows were tinted. The engine was deep and smooth. It parked in a space a few rows away. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out. He wore a black t-shirt, dark pants, and military boots. His face was serious. His eyes were cold, but sharp, like he had seen things others couldn't imagine. The crowd stared. He walked with purpose, his hands relaxed but powerful. The man didn't say a word as he approached. Officer Miller stepped forward and said, "Sir, this doesn't concern you. Please stay back." The man didn't stop. He walked right past the officer. Then he stood beside Evelyn. He looked at the officers and said in a calm, quiet voice, "Is there a problem with my mother?" Both officers froze. Officer Trent cleared his throat. She parked in a veteran spot. Claimed her son is someone." The man reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small leather case. He opened it. Inside was a military ID with the name Ethan King, along with several symbols most people didn't recognize. But one man in the crowd gasped. "That's a Special Forces sniper badge." Officer Miller's hands shook just a little. Ethan took off his sunglasses, revealing cold, piercing eyes. "I didn't serve overseas, risk my life, and bury my friends," he said, voice low and steady, "so you could mock the woman who raised me." Everyone went silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Only the sound of the wind and distant traffic filled the air. Evelyn looked up at her son, and gave a tiny smile. Ethan didn't smile back. He just stood there, taller than both officers, still as stone. Everyone in the parking lot stood still. You could feel the tension in the air. The two officers, who were laughing minutes ago, were now frozen in place. The man standing beside the elderly woman wasn't just someone's son. He was something much more. Ethan King, former Green Beret sniper, looked straight at the officers. His voice was calm, but there was something in his tone, something cold, something powerful. "I ask you a question," he said slowly. "Is there a problem with my mother?" Officer Miller blinked a few times, trying to look confident. "Sir, we didn't know she was your mother. She was parked in a veteran spot. That's all." Ethan raised one eyebrow. "She told you who I was," he said. "She showed you my photo." Officer Trent jumped in. "Yes, but sir, people lie all the time. You can't believe everything someone says. And besides, she didn't have any military tag." A soft whisper came from the small crowd. "She didn't lie." Ethan took a deep breath. He turned to face the crowd, scanning every face. Most people looked nervous or shocked. A few held up their phones, recording everything. Then Ethan looked back at the officers. "Tell me," he said, "what do you think gives you the right to mock an old woman? To make fun of her? Was it the uniform? The badge? The gun?" Neither officer answered. Ethan leaned a little closer. "I wore a uniform too," he said quietly. "But I never used it to bully someone who couldn't fight back." Officer Trent frowned. "Look, sir, we didn't hurt her. We were just doing our job." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You were abusing your job." His eyes were sharp now. His hands were still, but you could tell. This was a man who had trained for the worst. "I've seen bullies like you before," Ethan said. "In other countries. I've taken them down. I don't need a weapon for that." Officer Miller suddenly straightened up. "All right, that's enough. We didn't know who you were, okay? Let's just forget this and move on." But Ethan didn't move. Instead, he reached into his pocket again, and this time, he pulled out a second badge. It was a rare military medal, golden with a green ribbon. Someone in the crowd gasped. "That's a Silver Star." Another person added, "You don't get that unless you save lives. Big lives." Ethan held it up. "This isn't for show," he said. "I earned this after a mission that nearly cost me everything." He looked at the officers. "I fought in war zones. I watched my best friend die in my arms. And every single time I was out there, risking my life, I thought of her." He pointed to Evelyn. "My mother. The woman who worked 3 jobs to raise me. The woman who prayed for me every day I was gone. And the woman you decided to laugh at today." A young woman in the crowd wiped her eyes. Evelyn stood quietly beside her son, her hands folded in front of her. She hadn't said a word since he arrived, but you could see the pride in her eyes. The officers were quiet now. Their shoulders were stiff. Their faces had turned pale. And then, just when things seemed to calm down, Ethan pulled out his phone. He scrolled for a moment, then made a call. He didn't even move away from the crowd. Everyone could hear. "Hello? Yes, it's Ethan King. I need you to check on 2 local officers. Names, Miller and Trent. They're mocking civilians and wearing the badge without honor." The officer's eyes widened. Ethan ended the call. Officer Miller finally spoke, this time with fear in his voice. "Wait, who did you just call?" Ethan looked at him. "Someone who trained me. Someone you salute to." Just then, the sound of a second car engine echoed through the parking lot. A sleek black government vehicle pulled in. Out stepped a man in a dark suit. He wore a badge on his chest, Federal Law Enforcement. The man walked straight toward Ethan, shook his hand, and said, "We've been waiting to see you again." Officer Trent's mouth fell open. "Wait, you know him?" The agent turned to the officers. "Know him? You wouldn't be wearing that uniform if it weren't for this man." Ethan remained silent. But Evelyn smiled for the first time. The agent looked at the officers, his face hard. "What exactly did you say to this woman?" Neither of them could speak. A quiet voice from the crowd broke the silence. "They laughed at her, said her son was fake." The agent frowned. He looked at Ethan. "Would you like to press charges?" Ethan shook his head. No, I just want them to learn something today. He turned to the officers again. Never judge someone by what you see on the outside, he said. Because one day, you might just laugh at the wrong person's mother. Then he gently took Evelyn's hand. Let's go home, Mom. As they began to walk away, the crowd began to clap, slowly at first, then louder. People cheered. Some even saluted Ethan as he passed. The officers stood frozen, still holding their tickets. And behind them, the SUV door slowly closed with a quiet thud, like a seal on the moment they'd never forget. Ethan and his mother, Evelyn, slowly walked back to their car, but the shock from what just happened still hung heavy in the air. People were whispering, pointing, even wiping away tears. The officers, Miller and Trent, stood frozen, their faces pale as snow. They had mocked an old woman in public, laughed at her pain, and now they knew the truth. They had messed with the wrong mother. As Ethan helped his mother into the front seat of the car, the government agent who arrived, Agent Cole, turned to the officers. You two don't realize how lucky you are, he said. Ethan King is a legend. He served in some of the most dangerous places in the world. He could have destroyed your careers with one phone call. Miller looked away. Trent stammered, We didn't know, sir. We were just. Just what? Agent Cole cut in. Doing your job, or disrespecting a woman who gave everything for her son, while he gave everything for this country. The two officers had no answer. Back in the SUV, Evelyn looked at her son with soft eyes. I didn't want to bother you, Ethan, she said gently. You're always so busy with your missions and helping other soldiers. Ethan gave a small smile. Mom, you raised me to fight for what's right. If I can stand up for strangers, why wouldn't I stand up for you? Evelyn looked down at her hands. I didn't cry when you were in the war zones, but when they laughed at me today, I felt so small, so powerless. Ethan reached over and held her hand. You are not small, Mom. You're the strongest woman I know. And today, the whole world saw that. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Do you think they'll change? The officers, I mean. Ethan looked at the rearview mirror. The two officers were still standing there, watching the crowd leave. I don't know, he said. But I do know one thing. They'll never forget this day. Back at the police station, the mood was tense. Officer Trent sat at his desk, staring at the wall. Officer Miller paced the floor, still shaken. I looked him up, Miller said finally. Ethan King. 2-time Silver Star, sniper unit. Rescued an entire team from behind enemy lines. They call him the Ghost. Trent rubbed his face, and we laughed at his mother, like fools. Just then, their captain stormed in. He held a file in his hand and slammed it on the desk. You embarrassed this department, he barked. You mocked the war hero's mother in public, in uniform. Sir, we didn't know who she was, Trent said quickly. You didn't have to know, the captain shouted. She's a citizen, an elderly woman. That should be enough to treat her with respect. The room went silent. The captain picked up the file again and opened it. I just got off the phone with the mayor. He said Agent Cole filed an official report. Miller's heart dropped. What's going to happen to us? I don't know yet, the captain said coldly. But if I were you, I'd start preparing an apology. Later that evening, Evelyn sat on her front porch, holding a warm cup of tea. Ethan sat beside her, looking at the stars. You know, Evelyn said softly, when you were a little boy, I used to worry about you. You were always so serious, always watching people, always quiet. Ethan chuckled. I was planning missions in my head. Evelyn smiled. But I also saw your heart. Even back then, you were the kind of boy who stood up when other kids were bullied. You never walked away. Ethan turned to look at her. And I never will, Mom. Especially not when it's you. Suddenly, they heard a car pull up outside. Ethan stood up slowly, alert. 2 men stepped out. It was Officer Miller and Officer Trent. They walked slowly toward the porch. No uniforms this time, just regular clothes. Their faces were nervous, even scared. Ethan stayed standing, arms crossed. The officers stopped at the steps. We're not here to cause trouble, Trent said. We just wanted to apologize. Both of us. Evelyn looked surprised. Miller cleared his throat. Ma'am, we treated you like trash. We laughed at you. And that was wrong. It doesn't matter who your son is. You didn't deserve that. Trent nodded. We let the badge go to our heads, and we're sorry. Ethan studied their faces. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then Evelyn stood up. I accept your apology, she said kindly. I don't want hate in my heart. The officers looked relieved. But she added, I hope next time you remember, every person you meet could be someone's mother, someone's father, someone's hero. Both officers nodded. Then Miller looked at Ethan. We still respect what you did, even after what we did. You didn't have to protect her the way you did, but you did. Ethan finally spoke. It's not about being a soldier, he said. It's about being a son. The officers turned and walked back to their car. As they drove away, Evelyn looked at Ethan again. You really are your father's son? Ethan looked at her. No, Mom, he said softly. I'm your son. That night, after the officers left, Ethan sat on the living room floor of his mother's house. The soft glow of the lamp lit the room, and old family photos hung on the walls. Pictures of birthdays, holidays, and one photo of young Ethan in a small military uniform costume, saluting his mom. Evelyn entered the room holding a wooden box. She placed it gently on the coffee table in front of Ethan. What's this? He asked, looking at the worn box. Open it, she said quietly. Ethan lifted the lid. Inside were medals, shiny, heavy medals, silver stars, bronze stars, a purple heart, and under them all, a photo of Ethan in full combat gear, taken years ago. These were supposed to stay in a case, Ethan said. Why did you keep them all this time? Evelyn sat down beside him. Because every time I missed you, I opened this box. I looked at these and reminded myself that you were strong, that you were out there doing good, saving lives. Ethan looked at her with soft eyes. But I never wanted recognition, Mom. I just did my job. She nodded. I know. But the world needs to remember men like you. You didn't just serve your country. You protected families, villages, children, and you always came back to me. Ethan looked down at the medals. So many memories flooded his mind. Flashback. 10 years ago. Afghanistan. It was hot. Dust flew through the air as Ethan crawled across rocky ground with his sniper rifle strapped to his back. His team had been ambushed. 3 men were injured. The enemy was surrounding them. Ethan had one mission, to keep them alive. He moved from cover to cover, silent like a ghost. That's what they called him. The ghost. Because no one saw him coming. He took position on a rooftop and began calling targets. His aim was perfect. 1 shot, 1 save. His actions that day saved 5 soldiers and an Afghan family trapped in the crossfire. But Ethan never bragged. He never posted about it. He came home, hugged his mother, and stayed quiet. That's who he was. Back to the present. I remember that mission, Ethan said, holding one of the medals. I almost didn't make it home. But you did, Evelyn said. And do you know why? Ethan looked at her. Because you fight with more than weapons, she said. You fight with your heart. That's what makes you different. Ethan took a deep breath. Mom, after everything that happened today, I started thinking, I've been silent for too long. What do you mean? She asked. I mean the world doesn't know what people like you go through, he said. Mothers of soldiers. The pain, the fear, the strength. You get no medals, no parades, but you're heroes too. Evelyn blinked, touched. I want to speak out, Ethan continued. I want to share our story. Not just mine. Yours too. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, then smiled gently. If you think it'll help someone, then I'm proud of you. The next morning, Ethan uploaded a short video on his social media. It wasn't flashy, just him sitting beside his mother. My name is Ethan King, he said into the camera. I served for 15 years as a sniper in the U.S. Special Forces. I've received medals, praise, and awards, but the strongest person I know is my mother. He shared what had happened in the parking lot, how 2 officers mocked her, how no one helped, and how people judge others by their age or appearance. But what they didn't see he said, was the woman who stayed awake every night, praying for my safety. The woman who held this family together when I was gone. The woman who waited at every airport gate with tears in her eyes. The video ended with Ethan saying, "Never underestimate the power of someone just because they look weak, because behind every strong soldier is someone even stronger." The internet reacts. Within hours, the video went viral. People all over the world watched it. Soldiers messaged. Mothers cried. Veterans shared their own stories. Hashtags began to trend. Hashtag respect our elders. Hashtag green Beretson. Hashtag strong mothers. News channels picked it up. Talk shows called. Ethan and Evelyn were invited to speak. But most importantly, change started to happen. The local police department released an apology. The officers who mocked Evelyn were suspended and ordered to attend community respect training. A town meeting was planned to address how seniors were treated in public spaces. Ethan didn't want revenge. He wanted awareness. And he got it. Later that night, Evelyn and Ethan sat on the porch again. "Your video is everywhere," Evelyn said, shaking her head. "I even saw us on the news." Ethan laughed. "You're famous now, Mom." She chuckled. "I never wanted to be. I just wanted to buy some groceries without being insulted." "Well," Ethan said, "now people will think twice before doing it again." He looked up at the stars. "You know," he said softly, "all my life I trained to be strong, to fight, to protect. But nothing trained me for the day I saw you being disrespected. That hurt more than any mission." Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder. "And now you've done something even bigger," she said. "You've changed minds. And that, my son, is the greatest mission of all." Ethan smiled, feeling peace inside for the first time in years. 2 days after the video went viral, Ethan was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee in his hand. The wind was cool, the sun was soft, and the morning felt peaceful for once. Evelyn was inside baking muffins, humming an old tune. Just then, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Ethan stood up, instantly alert. The windows were tinted. The vehicle looked official. The door opened, and out stepped a tall man in full police uniform, dark blue, polished shoes, and gold pins on his shoulders. Behind him stood 2 more officers. But these men were different. They looked respectful, calm. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Mr. King?" the tall officer asked. "Yes," Ethan replied. The man extended his hand. "Captain Daniel Ross. I'm the new head of internal affairs at the department." Ethan hesitated, then shook his hand. "I'm not here to argue," the captain said quickly. "I'm here to talk. May we sit?" Ethan nodded and pointed to the porch chairs. "Go ahead." The captain sat down, removing his hat. "Your video shook this town. And not just this town. It reached the State Department. Even the Military Veterans Board contacted us." Ethan sat across from him, silent. "I watched the video 3 times, Ross continued. "You didn't ask for revenge. You asked for respect. That takes real strength." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "So what do you want from me, Captain?" Ross sighed. "I want to offer you something. Something official." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "We need help," Ross said. "Real help. Someone who understands discipline, integrity, and honor. Someone who can train our young officers, not just in tactics, but in how to treat people." "You're asking me to work with the police?" Ethan asked. "Yes," Ross replied. "Not as an officer, as a mentor, a leadership advisor. You get a department badge, a small office, and full control of training content." Ethan looked away for a moment, thinking. "You want me to teach people not to mock old women in parking lots?" Ross smiled a little. "Exactly." Ethan chuckled quietly. "That's one hell of a job title." Just then, Evelyn stepped outside with a tray of muffins. "Company?" she asked, surprised. "Mom, this is Captain Ross," Ethan said. "He came with an offer." Evelyn handed him a muffin. "Well, eat first, then talk business." Ross smiled warmly. "Thank you, ma'am." Later that day, Ethan sat alone in his old bedroom. The walls were still covered with posters from his teen years. The shelves still held dusty books and little army models. He looked down at the police badge Ross had given him to consider. It wasn't a promise. It was a choice. He thought back to all the missions, all the nights hiding in enemy territory, and he thought of that one moment in the parking lot, the helpless look in his mother's eyes when those officers laughed at her. Ethan stood up and looked at himself in the mirror. "I didn't come home just to sit quietly," he said aloud. "I came back to protect." Still, the next morning, Ethan walked into the local police department, wearing a simple black jacket and jeans. Every officer stopped and stared. Some whispered, some lowered their eyes. He walked straight to the front desk and handed the badge to the officer. "Tell Captain Ross," he said, "I'm in." The officer smiled nervously. "Yes, sir." Ross appeared minutes later, shaking Ethan's hand with pride. "Welcome aboard. Training begins." Over the next few weeks, Ethan transformed the department's training program. He didn't just teach how to handle weapons or how to follow rules. He taught character. "How you treat a stranger," he said during the first session, "tells me more about you than how you handle a gun." He invited veterans to speak about real-world respect. He brought in mothers of soldiers, grandmothers, and elderly volunteers to meet the officers face-to-face. He created a program called Honor First, and slowly, the department changed. The same young officer who had laughed at Evelyn in the parking lot now volunteered at the local retirement home. Another officer started a neighborhood patrol to help seniors carry groceries. Evelyn's reaction. One afternoon, Ethan returned home tired but smiling. "How was training?" Evelyn asked. He kissed her forehead. "The same officer who mocked you last month just drove Mrs. Peters to her doctor's appointment." Evelyn laughed. "Sounds like a miracle." "No, Mom," Ethan said, smiling. "It's respect. Something you always taught me." One final surprise. A month later, the mayor held a small ceremony in the town square. News crews were present. Families gathered, and Evelyn stood proudly at the front. Captain Ross took the mic. "We are honoring not just a hero, but a son, a teacher, and a protector." He handed Ethan a certificate and badge of honor. But then he turned to Evelyn. "And this woman," Ross said, "taught him what true strength looks like." The crowd clapped. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Ethan hugged her. "See," he whispered, "you got your medal after all." She smiled. "This one means the most." The town had changed a lot in just a few months. Thanks to Ethan, the local police department had started to rebuild its broken image. People on the streets no longer looked afraid. Elderly folks smiled when patrol cars passed, and officers now stopped to say hello instead of looking the other way. But peace never lasts forever. One cold evening, just as the sun was setting, a call came into the police station. It was Officer Daniels, the same young man who once mocked Evelyn in the parking lot. His voice was shaky. "There's a robbery in progress," he said. "It's at the downtown pharmacy. The suspect has a gun. People are still inside." The moment Ethan heard it, his heart started racing. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't wearing a badge. But he knew something. He was needed. He jumped into his truck and sped toward the pharmacy. At the crime scene, when Ethan arrived, red and blue lights flashed across the street. Several officers were hiding behind their cars, trying to keep civilians safe. People were screaming. The pharmacy's front window was broken, and glass was all over the sidewalk. Ethan ran up to Captain Ross. "What's happening?" he asked. Ross looked pale. "A man broke in with a gun. He's scared, maybe desperate. He says he needs medicine for his daughter." "How many people inside?" Ethan asked quickly. "2 customers, 1 cashier. The suspect's daughter is with him." Ethan paused. "A child?" Ross nodded. "Around 6 years old. She's sick. He says she needs insulin, but he couldn't afford it." Ethan took a deep breath. "Let me go in." Ross grabbed his arm. "Ethan, no. You're not a cop. I'm a soldier," Ethan said calmly. "And I've seen enough fear to know. This man isn't evil. He's scared." Ross looked him in the eyes. Then slowly he let go. "Be careful," he said. Inside the pharmacy, Ethan stepped through the broken door, hands raised. The man turned fast, pointing the gun. "Stop right there," he shouted. "Don't come closer." Ethan didn't flinch. It had been 3 months since Ethan stopped the robbery at the pharmacy. 3 months since a father laid down his gun, and a little girl named Maya got the help she needed. But something else had changed, something bigger than just one family. The town was different now. It wasn't just about better police work or fewer angry complaints. It was something deeper, something people could feel in the air. For the first time in a long time, the community and the police were no longer on opposite sides. They were standing together. At the coffee shop. One morning, Evelyn walked into the local coffee shop with a smile on her face. People who once ignored her now held the door open. A young officer at the counter stood up and offered her a chair. "Mrs. Evelyn, your tea's on the house today," he said with a grin. She laughed gently. "What's the occasion?" "You're the reason my captain tells us to respect everyone. You started it all." Evelyn's eyes watered. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. Officer Daniels' apology. Outside the shop, Officer Daniels waited. The same officer who had mocked Evelyn months ago now stood nervously with a bouquet of flowers. "I came to say sorry," he told her. Evelyn looked at him, her face soft and calm. "You've already shown me you're sorry," she said. "You changed." Daniels blinked. "I was raised to be better than how I acted that day. I forgot that. But Ethan reminded me." Evelyn nodded slowly. "He reminded all of us." Thomas Reed's trial. Meanwhile, in the courtroom across town, Thomas Reed, the father who had held up the pharmacy, stood before a judge. He was nervous, but he was not alone. Ethan was there. The same officer who had arrested him was there too. And even the pharmacy owner had come, holding Maya's hand. The judge listened to everything. How Thomas begged for help before turning to crime, how he gave up his weapon peacefully, how he had no criminal history. The room was quiet when the judge spoke. "You are not a danger to society," the judge said. "You are a father who made a mistake out of fear. You need help, not prison." Gasps filled the courtroom. "You will be released under community supervision," the judge continued. "You will attend counseling, and you'll work with Officer Ethan on community programs for fathers like you." Tears rolled down Thomas's face. Maya ran into his arms. Ethan just smiled. A town-wide program. Weeks later, something special started across the town. A new program, led by Ethan, began training police officers and helping struggling families. It was called the Evelyn Project. At the center of the program was one simple rule: see the person, not just the problem. Classes were held in schools, libraries, and even churches. Officers learned about kindness, patience, and listening. Families in need were connected to food banks, clinics, and local support groups. And Ethan, he wasn't just a former Green Beret anymore. He had become something more. A bridge between the forgotten and the powerful. A voice for the voiceless. A protector of those who didn't look like heroes, but were. The big ceremony. On a sunny Saturday, the whole town gathered at the park for a special ceremony. There was food, music, and laughter. Children ran around in the grass. Seniors sat together, sharing stories and smiles. At the center stage, Mayor Collins stood with a microphone. "This town was broken," he said, "but it began to heal because one man came back, not with anger, but with courage and compassion." He turned to Ethan, who stood beside Evelyn. "Ethan Walker, on behalf of this town, we honor you." The crowd stood and clapped. Some cried. Even officers who once doubted him now cheered with pride. Ethan stepped up to the mic. He paused. Then he looked around and said something simple. "I didn't come to be a hero. I came to help my mother and ended up helping my home." Later that night, as the sun set, Ethan and Evelyn sat on their porch drinking tea. The streets were calm. The town felt peaceful. "You changed this place, Ethan," Evelyn whispered. Ethan shook his head. "No, Mom. You did. It all started with you and that parking lot." She smiled. "Funny, isn't it? How something so small led to something so big?" He nodded. "It always starts small. One person, one act of kindness, one moment." Then, a car drove by. The officer inside waved at them. And Ethan knew, deep in his heart, that the battle was worth it. The town had transformed because of truth, because of love, and because one old woman refused to be silent.